Hello, my name is Greg Boer, and I'm a product owner for the Agile Planning tools delivered as a part of Team Foundation Server. In this session, I'm going to demonstrate how to configure Kanban boards within TFS, which is pretty cool. There are a lot of solutions out there that allow a team to configure a Kanban board, but what TFS allows is that each team can configure their own Kanban board, but still provide the ability to do enterprise rollup across multiple teams. Let's get started, and I'll show you how. Before we get started at looking at the feature, I would like to talk a little bit about what Kanban is. Kanban has a couple of principles that really drive it. The first principle is that a team should visualize the flow of their work. So rather than having just a list of work in a tabular format, Kanban really proposes that you should visualize the flow of your work as it moves from one end of the process to the other. So here you'll see that an item can move from the new to the active development state into resolved, where it's being verified by testing, and eventually into closed. The second principle of Kanban is to limit your work in progress, or your WIP as it calls it. There's a lot of mathematical proof behind the fact that a cost of delay of something being in a queue while people are working on things is actually very costly to an organization, and that if you really want to maximize the efficiency of the entire organization, you should really limit the amount of work in progress to a very few items, so that you have people with a lot less on their to-do list and a lot more on their doing list. And then the third principle is really to manage the flow. So let's look at an example here. Let's imagine that we have a team, it's a development team, and the developers are really rocking out the code and getting stuff done. And they're done with these things, and they have a choice of saying, well, I could go ahead and move this into the resolve state and pull another one on the item off the new list and start working on it. But let's look at where our testers are at. Our testers are overloaded. And it doesn't matter how fast the developers get their work done. If the testers are overloaded, you're going to constrict the workflow as it moves from the left to the right. So what Kanban principles really say is, rather than the developer going and pulling another item off the list and coding on it, what they should do is move over, help the testers finish off their queue, get the flows to a steady rate, so that what you have is that you have items that can flow at a pretty steady rate from here all the way to the end of the process. Here in TFS, we're looking at a backlog. This is really your list of work items that in a priority fashion, which is very useful for planning. You can drag and drop and reorder items here as well. What Kanban wants you to do is be able to visualize this work as it flows across your process. By just simply clicking on the Board tab here, you can start seeing the same work items that were in your backlog, but now visualized across the flow. So you can see where items can move from the backlog into a design, and from design into coding, then into testing, then into closed. Making a little extra room here so we can see it. You can see how these items move from one end to the other. Now, if a team wanted to go ahead and modify the columns, it's as simple as clicking on this button here, and now you see a column configuration dialog where I can go ahead and modify my columns and change them. For example, if I wanted to change this to be done, I can go ahead and simply change that, and now I've updated my board to say done instead of closed. Adding a new column is really just as easy. I can go ahead here. Let's say we want to add a design review column. I can go ahead and just add that column, type in the word design review, hit save, and now I have a new column on my board for design review that I can start dragging things into. So this is about really visualizing your flow. You also see that we have a feature here for managing your work item limit. You can configure this on the same dialog, where with this new column I can say, I really only want one item in design review at any given time. So now what happens is if I drag this item into a design review, and let's say I drag another one into design review, I have now exceeded my work in process limit here, and really what we need to do is we need to put that back over here, and we wouldn't work on this until we're able to make room over in these columns here. Now you may have noticed in this customization dialog that we're mapping things to states here. Now this is really where the power of TFS comes in, Because what I can do is, as a team has a flexibility to define the board to look however they want. They can have 3 columns, they can have 30 columns if they want. It's really up to the team. And that's really an aspect of Kanban, is to visualize your current process and allow the team to fluidly change the board to match what they're learning about the process and how they improve. But you have the problem of when you have multiple teams, you want to roll up across those teams. And this is where mapping to states comes in. What I can do here is I can say, look, with each of these columns right here, I have said that they're all mapped to the active state of the user story work item. And the testing column is mapped to the resolved state of the user story work item. So if the team decides they want to add another column and they want to change this one to be exploratory testing, and you want to go ahead and create one for automation testing, you can see that both of them are mapped to the same column. So what that means is any item that's dragged over to these columns, the state automatically gets set for you. So to demonstrate, you'll see here that it's in the coding column mapped to the active state. By simply dragging the item over here into a testing column, you'll see that now it's mapped to the resolved state. And if you drag any of these items to the done column, we automatically on the back end will set it to the state that you've mapped it to. So the team can just focus on the board as they've defined it, and all the mapping to the process underneath the scenes is done for you. So let's go ahead and look at another team's board. Let's look at Team B. Team B really operates in more of a Scrum-like fashion with sprints, and they have a new column, they have a ready for sprint column, which means it's ready for the next sprint, and within a sprint things are either in dev or in test, and then they're marked as done. You'll see here, if I open up this, that I've mapped each one of these columns to the same set of states that were available for the other team. So ready for sprint still is in new, it's not in progress. In dev is active, in test is resolved, and of course done is marked closed. So then dragging items into any of these states will automatically then set the state for you. Now where this becomes very powerful is, let's say I had a query. And in that query, what I did is I had the ability I wanted to find out all the stories that were done in the last 2 days. So I can create a query that says, give me all the stories where the close date is in the last couple of days and the state is equal to closed. Now what you can see is any time a team updates their work item to the column mapped to the closed state, I can see it no matter what the team does. So you can see that in my demo, I have mapped one item to the closed state. If I go back to Team B, and we're going to go ahead and view their board. Let's go ahead and just drag a few items to the done state here. We'll go to Team A. We're going to drag a few items to the done state there as well. And then I can go back to my query. And I can see that I can easily query for any item closed in the last couple of days across all the teams. Each team gets to define what their flow looks like, but you still get this ability to roll up across teams. And of course, this works for any of the states as well. You can look at items that are in the active development state, you can look at items that are in the resolved state, or whatever state model you've chosen to do your reporting on. I've shown you how a team can easily configure its Kanban board, mapping the board's columns to states to allow for enterprise rollup, giving agile teams the autonomy to manage their work the way they want while allowing transparency and visibility across teams. Enjoy the features.